Hi and welcome to the Power of Authenticity. My name's Mark Adams and today we're going to be looking at one of the main questions that comes up for me from people when running workshops and receiving comments online is that how do you know if you're being authentic or not? And it's actually a really difficult question to ask because there's quite a few different layers to it. So with authenticity, the basic meaning of it is to be able to express yourself into the world. But the nuance and the trouble arises when you ask the question, who is yourself in the first place to be expressed? And this is where the mind comes in with all of its conditioning, its belief systems, its traumas, its memory. And the trouble is with authenticity that the expression of it is more of a letting go, more of a surrendering into the present moment, rather than using the mind to try and construct this idea of yourself. So the tricky thing that a lot of people are trying to navigate is they're trying to articulate and express themselves from their level of understanding. So it's almost like a mental authenticity. But the tricky thing here, the trouble is that that's where all of the conditioning and the programs are. And so people will unconsciously, unbeknown to themselves, express their own conditioning and their beliefs and think of it as their authenticity, when in actual fact it's not. It's actually a display of basically just like what's happened to them and how it's ingrained into their personality. And so when people ask me this question, how do you know if you're being authentic? I tend to redirect them back into the present moment and back into the feelings, because it's only really when we're present, when we're tuned into our emotional awareness, that we can actually understand what authenticity really means and actually experience it. Authenticity is something that can't really articulate to you. Nobody can articulate it to someone. You can't read about it. It's only really when you've experienced it and you've lived it that you can actually understand it for yourself, and then you can't really tell anyone about it. You can point people in the direction and you can give them the tools to find it for themselves. But authenticity, it's a really abstract thing in terms of thinking, because it's actually an embodiment, and you can't really teach that. You can only really point in the direction of it, and you can give people the tools necessary to make it happen for themselves. And so as best as I can, I'll try and articulate what it feels like for me. But honestly, just take this as a perspective, a direction, not as truth. This is the truth for me, but you have to understand that what I'm about to try and explain is actually a deep inner intuition, an inner working, an inner dimension which has no language. And so to try and put language to it, I have no idea what I'm about to say on it, so it's going to be quite interesting. So I'll start with this. I'll start with what I do know, and I'll see how it builds from there. So there's been these moments where I've had like a lucidity. Like when you become lucid in a dream, when you become aware that you're dreaming, you become aware that the construct you're operating in isn't the final reality. So I've had these moments in life where I'll be talking to somebody and it'll be coming from such a deep space within me that I actually almost like wake up to the dream of reality. And so just just let me explain this for 1 second, because authenticity means different things to different people, but basically on the deepest level, authenticity would genuinely be soul expression, knowing your soul throughout its totality and being able to animate and express it in physical reality. And then obviously that's quite a lofty thing to be able to do, so there would be layers to it. And so what I'm explaining here is the deepest layers that I've experienced of it. Not the deepest, but just for me personally, the deepest layer that I've experienced has been these moments of lucidity where I become aware of the deeper dimension of the moment, where in my expression, it's coming from a place within me that goes beyond my physical identity. It's coming from such a pure space that it's a different experience in a feeling sense. I'm just making this up as I go along, but I'm actually trying to articulate the experience, the feeling experience. But what I'm trying to do is trying to get it into an understandable articulation, because it's really quite abstract. It's honestly just an intuitive understanding that the way I'm operating in this moment is the deepest truth that I can express. And the feeling that comes along with it is one of like a warmth. It's the kind of feeling where you know the other person is vibing with you because you're giving them your deepest self, and they are receiving you for it. And you can feel in that moment that it's an offer, it's an invitation for them to play in that depth with you. And there's something really beautiful in that, because at the end of the day, everybody is trying their best to cultivate connection. And what better way to cultivate deeper connection than to focus on exploring the deepest parts of yourself and interacting with the world from that space? Then the relationships that you're creating inevitably are going to be based on that foundation. And whether or not the other person is evolved enough to meet you on that level, or they could be higher, for instance, but whether or not they're on your level or not, they will feel some sort of magnetism, this invitation on a subtle level. It won't be something that will be spoken about, not necessarily, unless you're talking to me, then I might be able to articulate and speak to what's actually happening. But usually what will happen is that when you communicate with someone from this deep, authentic place, within them, they tune into it as well without really knowing what's going on, and they deliver themselves on that level as well. So ultimately, you've given them the gift of insight into themselves. Because if enough people did that for somebody, then eventually that would become neurologically hardwired, and so they would have access to it without your invitation. You see what I mean? And then the next person and the next person, it like ripples out, and then more and more people tune into this. So that was a little bit about how to know if you're being authentic or not. And in a nutshell, just to summarize, it's not something that you can be told, yes you are doing, or no you're not. You could, by someone who was like psychically open, or someone who can just feel the resonance of that. Like I can sometimes, quite often actually, feel if somebody is expressing themselves from that space of authenticity or not. But at the end of the day, the answer to the question is, it's an intuition. It's about getting in touch with your emotional awareness and understanding that on that level of intelligence, your emotional intelligence, which is the playground of your intuition, that's what speaks to you in that moment. And that's how you will become familiar with these deeper levels of yourself. And ultimately, that's how you're going to gauge your own level of authenticity. It's not a game of thinking. It's absolutely not. You can think in such a way to redirect your awareness. Like, you can have the thought of, I'm going to take my awareness back into my body and feel. And that's using the brain like as it's designed to be used. But using the brain to try and figure out, it's just going to be getting wrapped up and curled around in all of these belief systems, and ultimately it would just end up being a prettier package of your ego, basically. So the best thing to do is to come out of that playing field, out of the mind, and start operating on the feeling sense of nature and reality. And that's how you're going to be able to gauge where your authenticity is. And you can express your deepest authenticity in the moment, and you can only do it in the present moment. So be aware of that. Your greatest gift for tuning into your authenticity is going to be your ability to be present with yourself and with others. And with that, your authenticity in the present moment may change as the present moment progresses through time. And so in 5 years' time, your idea of authenticity might change, but it doesn't mean that 5 years ago you weren't being authentic. You were being authentic to the level of awareness that you had then, but your awareness has grown, and now you're here, and now your expression is still authentic, but it's just grown and evolved. And then obviously, and so on and so forth. So in 10 years, your authenticity will be different to what it is now. And I'll end with this. No level is right or wrong, but the quality of life is massively affected by somebody's ability to express themselves authentically, because that is the foundation of connection. So thanks for listening. See you next time.